I never thought I'd be the one to clean out my daughter's apartment. Parents aren't supposed to bury their children. That's not how life works. But there I was, standing in the middle of Emma's living room, surrounded by the artifacts of her life. A life cut painfully short at 28. The doctor said it was an aneurysm. Sudden and painless, he assured me, as if that would somehow ease the crushing weight of grief that had settled over my shoulders. Nothing about losing Emma was painless. I'd been putting this off for 3 weeks. Her landlord had been patient, but eventually I had to face the impossible task of deciding what to keep, what to donate, and what to throw away. How do you dismantle your child's existence and pack it into cardboard boxes? "Take all the time you need, Mr. Carson," Emma's neighbor, Mrs. Feinstein, had said when she let me in. She was a kind woman in her 60s who had apparently looked after Emma's cat while she was at work. She was such a lovely girl, always bringing me soup when I was sick last winter. That was Emma, always thinking of others, even when she barely had time for herself. Working 60-hour weeks at the law firm, determined to make junior partner before 30. I moved through the small one-bedroom apartment like a ghost, touching her things gently, as if she might walk through the door any minute and ask what I was doing there. Her bookshelf was crammed with law textbooks and thriller novels. The fridge was still half full. A coffee mug with dried residue sat on her nightstand. It was when I reached her home office that I remembered the drawer, the bottom right drawer of her desk. Once, about 2 years ago, I'd been looking for a stamp while visiting, and Emma had practically jumped across the room to stop me from opening it. "Dad, please don't go through my desk," she'd said, her voice higher than usual. "I have private client files in there." I'd apologized and thought nothing of it. Emma was always professional about client confidentiality, but there had been something in her eyes that day, a flash of something that looked almost like fear. Now, standing in her silent apartment, that drawer seemed to call to me. I sat in her chair, feeling the leather that had molded to her shape over countless late nights. The desk was neat, organized. Emma had always been methodical, even as a child, lining up her stuffed animals by size. My hand hovered over the drawer handle. Was it wrong to invade her privacy? She was gone, but did that give me the right to pry into whatever she had wanted to keep secret? I pulled the drawer open. Inside was a single manila folder, unlabeled. My heart pounded as I lifted it out. Whatever this was, Emma had been protective of it. Maybe it was just work documents after all. But when I opened the folder, what I found instead was a series of printed emails, official-looking documents, and a flash drive taped to the inside cover. The top email was addressed to someone named Claire Winters, but Emma's name was Claire Winters. I scanned the email, confusion mounting. It was from someone named Marcus, dated about 3 years ago. "Claire, the new identity is set. Emma Carson's background is rock solid. Diploma from UC Berkeley, employment history with the firm in Chicago, driver's license, social security number. No one will connect you to Portland or what happened. The debt has been paid, and Layton's people have confirmed they consider the matter closed. Remember our agreement. Maintain your cover, never contact anyone from before, and live a normal life. $3 million buys a lot of freedom, but not if you get careless. Be smart, be safe, be Emma." My hands were shaking. Emma wasn't Emma. My daughter had been living under a false identity. I felt the room tilt slightly as I tried to process what I was reading. The daughter I thought I knew, the little girl I had raised after her mother died, had been keeping a secret so profound I couldn't begin to comprehend it. I shuffled through the other papers. There were documents for both identities, birth certificates, social security cards, one for Emma Carson showing she was born in Cincinnati, where we had actually lived, and another for Claire Winters, born in Portland, Oregon. But it was the newspaper clipping at the bottom of the stack that made my blood run cold. The headline read, "Portland Tech CEO Jason Layton found dead in home. Police suspect foul play." The article was dated 3 years and 2 months ago, just weeks before Emma had called me, saying she was moving to Boston for a wonderful new job opportunity. The photo showed a handsome man in his 40s, with piercing eyes and a confident smile. I had never seen him before, but as I stared at the image, I noticed a framed photo on the shelf behind Leighton. It showed him with his arm around a young woman, her face partly obscured but unmistakable. It was Emma, or rather, Claire. My phone buzzed in my pocket, startling me. Unknown number. I almost declined it, too shaken to talk to anyone, but something made me answer. "Hello?" There was a pause, then a man's voice. "Mr. Carson, my name is Marcus Reed. We need to talk about your daughter." The same Marcus from the email. "I think we do," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Don't touch anything else in that drawer," he said, "and whatever you do, don't plug in that flash drive." "I'll be there in 20 minutes. The line went dead. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, wondering who my daughter really was and what terrible secret had followed her all the way to her grave. Marcus Reed arrived exactly 20 minutes later, just as I had replaced everything in the drawer except for the folder. He knocked twice, quietly, almost as if he was afraid of being heard. When I opened the door, I found myself face to face with a man in his 50s, silver-haired, wearing an expensive suit that seemed at odds with his weathered face. "Mr. Carson," he said, extending his hand. I didn't take it. "You have 5 minutes to explain who you are and what you know about my daughter before I call the police," I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. He nodded, unperturbed by my hostility. "That's fair. May I come in?" I stepped aside and he entered Emma's apartment, his eyes immediately darting to the folder on the desk. He sighed deeply. "I was afraid of this," he muttered. "When I heard about Emma's death—" He paused, correcting himself. "About Claire's death, I knew I needed to get here before you found that drawer." "So my daughter's real name was Claire Winters?" I asked, the words feeling strange in my mouth. Marcus looked at me, confusion crossing his features. "No, Mr. Carson. Emma was your daughter's real name. Claire Winters was the identity she adopted 3 years ago when she came to me for help." Now I was completely lost. "I don't understand." He gestured to the couch. "You might want to sit down for this." I remained standing. "Just tell me." Marcus ran a hand through his silver hair. "I'm a fixer, Mr. Carson. I help people disappear when they're in trouble. 3 years ago, Emma came to me terrified, saying she needed a new identity. She said she'd witnessed something she shouldn't have, involving a powerful man named Jason Leighton. I glanced at the newspaper clipping about Leighton's murder that I'd left on the desk. Marcus followed my gaze and nodded grimly. Emma was working as a paralegal at a law firm in Portland that handled Leighton's business affairs. She was ambitious, staying late, hoping to impress the partners. One night, she overheard Leighton and one of the senior partners discussing what she described as moving illegal funds through shell companies. She made the mistake of confronting the partner about it the next day, thinking she was doing the right thing. My heart clenched. That sounded like Emma, always ethical to a fault. The partner denied everything, of course, but 2 days later, Emma's apartment was broken into. Nothing was taken, but her laptop was open, and she knew someone had been through her files. "She was being threatened," I said, the realization making me feel sick. "Yes, when she came to me, she was convinced they were going to kill her to keep her quiet. So I helped her become Claire Winters. New identity, new background, new city. But something unexpected happened. Leighton was murdered," I said. Marcus nodded. "1 week after Emma disappeared. The police suspected his business partner, but nothing was ever proven. Emma called me, panicking, convinced they would think she had something to do with it. So we modified the plan. Instead of maintaining the Claire Winters identity, I helped her revert to being Emma Carson again, but with a new background, new degree, new employment history, everything except her connection to you." "Why didn't she come to me?" I whispered, the pain of her distrust like a knife in my chest. "I would have protected her." "She was protecting you," Marcus said gently. She was afraid if anyone connected her to her real past, they might come after you too. That's why she told you she was just moving for a job opportunity. The less you knew, the safer you were. I sank into the chair by the desk, my legs no longer able to support me. All these years, all those phone calls and visits, she was living in fear. At first, Marcus said, but after a year passed with no incidents, she started to relax. After 2 years, she believed it was truly over. The authorities had closed the Leighton case. His business partner was still being watched, but had never been charged. Emma, or Claire, as I still thought of her, was thriving in her new life. Then why keep all of this? I gestured to the folder. Insurance, in case something happened and she needed to run again. But she told me 6 months ago that she was thinking of destroying it all. She said she was tired of looking over her shoulder, tired of the lie. I looked up at him sharply. You spoke to her 6 months ago? I thought you just helped her with the identity change. A shadow crossed Marcus's face. We stayed in touch. I cared about her well-being. Something in his tone made me look at him more closely. You were involved with my daughter. It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. We were close. It started as me checking on her safety, but it became more. We were actually discussing... He trailed off, pain evident in his eyes. Discussing what? Whether it was time to tell you the truth. She hated lying to you. Said it was eating her up inside. A memory surfaced. Emma during her last visit 2 months ago, sitting at my kitchen table, opening and closing her mouth several times, as if on the verge of saying something important, before finally just asking for more coffee instead. Do you think her death had anything to do with this? With Leighton? I asked, the horrible possibility only now occurring to me. Marcus shook his head firmly. No, I made some calls when I heard. It was exactly what the doctors said. A cerebral aneurysm. A tragic medical event, not foul play. She'd put the past behind her. She was safe. His voice cracked on the last word. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Boston street below. People were walking dogs, carrying groceries, living their normal lives while mine had just been shattered for the second time in a month. What's on the flash drive? I asked, still facing the window. Evidence, Marcus replied. Everything she gathered about Leighton's illegal activities before she fled, plus recordings of the threats made against her by the partner, a man named Victor Reeves. I turned to face him. So, she was a whistleblower. She wanted to be, but she was too afraid. The partner had connections everywhere. Police, FBI, judiciary. That's why she ran instead of fighting. And now? Marcus looked at me intently. Now, it's up to you, Mr. Carson. That flash drive could still expose a lot of powerful people, people who might still want that information buried, even if they've stopped looking for Emma. I thought of my daughter, my brave, principled daughter, living in fear, changing her identity, cutting herself off from her past, all because she tried to do the right thing. Take me to her grave, Marcus said suddenly, his voice rough with emotion. I couldn't attend the funeral. It would have raised too many questions. I studied him, this stranger who seemed to know my daughter in ways I never had. First, tell me one thing. Did she love you? His eyes met mine, unwavering. Yes, and I loved her. We were planning to get married next spring. She was going to tell you everything then. I nodded slowly, processing this final revelation. My daughter had found love in the midst of all this deception and fear. It was both comforting and heartbreaking. All right, I said. I'll take you to her grave. And then you're going to help me decide what to do with that flash drive. As we left the apartment, I locked the drawer that had held my daughter's secret. The truth was out now, at least part of it. But I had a feeling Emma's story wasn't finished yet. The cemetery was quiet that afternoon, with only a groundskeeper visible in the distance. Emma's grave was still adorned with flowers from my last visit, roses that were now beginning to wilt, much like the false sense of understanding I'd had about my daughter's life. Marcus stood before the headstone, his face a mask of contained grief. He knelt and placed a small white orchid at the base of the granite. It was her favorite, he said softly. She had one on her desk that she babied like it was a pet. I nodded. I didn't know that. There's a lot we didn't know about each other's relationships with her, Marcus said, rising to his feet again. She lived in carefully separated worlds. We stood in silence for a moment, united in our loss, if nothing else. The autumn wind rustled the maple trees surrounding the cemetery, sending a shower of red and gold leaves spiraling down around us. I've been thinking about that flash drive, I finally said. I want to know what's on it. Marcus turned to me, his expression grave. That could be dangerous, Mr. Carson. My name is Robert, I said, and my daughter lived in fear for 3 years because of what's on that drive. I need to see it. I need to understand. After a long moment, Marcus nodded. Not here, though, and not at her apartment. We should go somewhere secure. We ended up at a small hotel on the outskirts of Boston. Marcus booked a room under a name I suspected wasn't his real one, paid in cash, and swept the room for electronic devices before finally opening his laptop. Ready? He asked, the flash drive hovering over the USB port. Yes, I answered, though I wasn't sure if I would ever truly be ready for what Emma had been hiding. The drive contained dozens of files meticulously organized in folders. Financial records, offshore account numbers, emails, and voice recordings. Emma, always thorough, always detail-oriented, had compiled enough evidence to bring down not just Jason Layton, but 6 other executives and lawyers at the firm. This is worth millions, Marcus said, as we scrolled through the documents. Not just in the sense of what these people stole, but in its value as blackmail material. I clicked on one of the audio files, and my daughter's voice filled the room. I'm recording this conversation on April 12, 2022, at 11:43 p.m., in case anything happens to me. Earlier today, Victor Reeves told me that if I went to the authorities with what I found in the Cayman transfers, I would disappear so completely that even my father would forget I existed. This is the 3rd threat he's made since I confronted him about the Layton funds last week. My throat tightened. Even in her fear, Emma's voice was steady, methodical, documenting everything like the lawyer she had aspired to be. She was incredibly brave, Marcus said, watching me. Too brave for her own safety. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Did she ever consider using this after Layton died? We discussed it, Marcus admitted. But Victor Reeves was still out there, still powerful, and there were others involved who had just as much to lose. Without Layton to take the fall as the ringleader, exposing this would have put an even bigger target on her back. I closed the audio file, unable to bear hearing any more of my daughter's voice calmly cataloguing threats against her life. Instead, I opened a folder labeled Correspondence and found dozens of emails, some between Layton and various business associates, others between the partners at the law firm. How did she get access to all this? I asked, amazed at the breadth of evidence. She was smarter than they gave her credit for, Marcus said, a hint of pride in his voice. They thought she was just a paralegal who'd accidentally seen one incriminating email. They didn't realize she'd been gathering evidence for months, ever since she first suspected something was wrong with the accounts she was processing. As we continued through the files, a fuller picture emerged of what my daughter had uncovered. A massive money laundering operation disguised as legitimate business investments, with tentacles reaching into politics, real estate, and even charitable foundations. Layton had been the face of it, but Victor Reeves had been the architect. So what happened to Layton? I asked. If Reeves was behind all this, Marcus's expression darkened. I believe Reeves had Layton killed when he became a liability. Layton was flashy, drawing too much attention. Based on what Emma told me, they'd started arguing about exposure risks. And now Reeves is still out there, still free. I felt a slow burn of anger building in my chest. Free, but not completely. The FBI has been watching him since Layton's death. They just haven't had enough evidence to move against him. I looked at the screen at the mountains of evidence my daughter had compiled. Until now. Marcus studied my face. What are you thinking, Robert? I'm thinking that my daughter died still carrying this burden. She never got justice. She never got to stop looking over her shoulder. I took a deep breath. I want to finish what she started. That could be dangerous, I know, I interrupted. But Emma is beyond their reach now, and I'm just a grieving father with nothing left to lose. Marcus was silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. There's someone I know at the Justice Department, someone I trust. We could send copies of these files through secure channels. Would it be enough to bring charges against Reeves and the others? More than enough, Marcus confirmed. Emma was thorough. This is the kind of evidence prosecutors dream about. I thought of my daughter, changing her name, building a new life, falling in love with the man sitting across from me, all while carrying this knowledge, this responsibility. Let's do it, I said, but I want one more thing. What's that? I want to be there when they arrest him. I want Victor Reeves to know that Emma, that Claire, had the last word. 3 weeks later, I stood across the street from the gleaming Boston offices of Chamberlain, Reeves and Associates, watching as federal agents led Victor Reeves out in handcuffs. He was a tall man with silver hair and an expression of utter disbelief that his world was crumbling around him. As the agents guided him toward a waiting SUV, his eyes swept the crowd of onlookers and briefly met mine. I stepped forward, just enough for him to focus on me. "Emma Carson sends her regards," I said, just loud enough for him to hear. His face went pale, recognition and fear dawning simultaneously. He knew who I was, and now he knew that my daughter had outsmarted him from beyond the grave. That evening, Marcus and I met one last time at a small cafe near the waterfront. "It made the national news," he said, sliding a newspaper across the table. The headline read, "Major law firm implicated in $200 million money laundering scheme." She would have liked that, I said, a bittersweet smile touching my lips. She always wanted to make headlines as a lawyer, just not quite like this. Marcus nodded. "The prosecutor says they're going after everyone involved. Reeves will likely spend the rest of his life in prison." "Good." I took a sip of my coffee, feeling a strange mixture of grief and satisfaction. "What will you do now?" "Disappear for a while," he said. "My line of work isn't conducive to publicity." "Before you go," I said, reaching into my pocket, "Emma would have wanted you to have this." I slid a small velvet box across the table. Marcus opened it to find Emma's mother's ring, a simple diamond that I had given her when I'd asked about the man making my daughter happy, the man she kept mentioning in our calls but never quite introduced to me. "She told me about it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Said it was vintage, from the 1960s. It was. Her mother wore it for 20 years before she passed." I stood up, ready to leave this chapter behind. "Take care of yourself, Marcus." He nodded, closing the ring box and slipping it into his pocket. "You too, Robert." 2 days later, I finished clearing out Emma's apartment. The drawer that had held her secrets was now empty, its contents either in the hands of federal prosecutors or destroyed. I'd kept only one thing, a photo I had found, hidden behind the others on her bookshelf, showing Emma and Marcus on what looked like a weekend hiking trip, both of them laughing, truly happy. As I locked the apartment door one final time, I realized that while I had lost my daughter, I had finally found the truth about who she really was. Not just Emma or Claire, but a brave woman who had risked everything for what she believed was right. And in the end, she had won. Her secret had become her legacy, a legacy of truth that would outlive us all. I walked out into the Boston afternoon, feeling my daughter's presence beside me, no longer a shadow of secrets, but a memory made whole at last.